into it. Just allow me to get this preamble out of the way, and then we can make our way to them properly. So, when Zombie Island proved successful, Warner Brothers thought it prudent to make more Scooby Doo movies set in the same continuity, which is Ghost being the first, taking the gang from the bayous of Louisiana to small-town Massachusetts. By the way, since it's the topic of the movie, with some of it being plot-relevant, I'm actually going to be bringing up some witch-related trivia. For example, did you know that the Salem witch trials didn't happen in Salem, Massachusetts? The trials mainly took place in Salem Village, which since 1752 became the town of Danvers. Danvers is actually somewhat famous in its own right due to the infamy of Danvers State Hospital, a psychiatric hospital which, due to the horrific conditions it devolved into, many historians believe to have inspired H.P. Lovecraft's Arkham Sanatorium from the story The Thing on the Doorstep, which then itself inspired Batman's Arkham Asylum. Suffice it to say, despite being inducted into the National Register of Historic Places in 1984, it was demolished in 2007. Now, the consensus from what I can tell is that people like Witch's Ghost, but it's not as iconic as Zombie Island. One of the reasons might be that compared to Zombie Island, Witch's Ghost isn't as scary. The filmmakers were explicitly told to take it down a notch with the horror stuff, citing worries about how scary Zombie Island was. Of course, its imagery isn't really why Witch's Ghost is so fondly remembered, is it? While we're still talking about changes, Shaggy actually had to be recast from Billy West to Scott Innes, who also voiced Scooby in this. Billy didn't get in any trouble or refuse to come back. He just needed to focus on a new project around that time called Futurama. Maybe you've heard of it? Alright, let's get this thing started. So, like Zombie Island, the gang starts the movie at the tail end of an investigation. In this case, they're pretending to be museum exhibits to thwart the machinations of two undead warriors, with Shaggy and Scooby being the ones to spring the initial net trap. Unfortunately, the gang forgot to account for the warriors' weapons. And of course, now instead of Third Eye Blind performing the theme, this time it's Billy Ray Cyrus.
Come on, Scooby Doo, 'cause I can see the way you shake and shiver.
During the chase, a strange foot comes out, tripping the warriors, landing them in a cage. In the aftermath, the warriors are unmasked to reveal them as disgruntled archaeologists, and the strange foot is revealed to belong to someone that Velma, assuming she still has the bookstore, recognizes and probably stocks his books.
You're Ben Ravencroft, the famous horror writer.
Ben claims he was doing independent research at the museum when he noticed the archaeologist acting strangely, so he took it upon himself to investigate. And as it turns out, Ben is familiar with the gang, and taking advantage of this moment of serendipity between purveyors of mystery, Ben, having already made plans to head back to his hometown of Oak Haven, Massachusetts for the weekend, which he does every year to see the leaves change, invites the gang to come with him. Wait a minute, Ben is American? Then why the hell does he speak with Tim Curry's natural British accent? I mean, I know why. Because if you can get Tim Curry, you don't care if it makes sense for an American to sound like he's from Warrington. Now, on the road to New England, Velma gets to have a little FaceTime with Ben while the gang follows behind in the Mystery Machine. Arriving at Oak Haven, Ben is puzzled by the amount of tourists that are currently holding up traffic. Spotting the mayor, the gang and Ben ask what's going on with all these people.
It's great, isn't it? Business is booming.
Turns out that since Ben last visited, the town has recreated Oak Haven's original Puritan village as a tourist destination and is hosting an event, the Oak Haven Autumn Fest, to celebrate, including a special band performance and the pharmacist Mr. McKnight helping to distribute t-shirts.
I met the ghost of Oak Haven and lived.
The mayor also tells Velma that the witch in question is Ben's ancestor, Sarah Ravencroft. This detail irks Ben, given he believes his ancestor was not a witch in any way, shape, or form, instead being a healer. A bit more on that later. The mayor also claims that most of the tourists are here because her ghost has been spotted around town ever since the village got built. The gang immediately guessing the situation as her vengeful ghost haunting the town as revenge for disturbing her final resting place. Interesting fact, did you know that the stereotypical image we associate with a witch, pointy hat, big old cauldron, and black cat, happens to be quite similar to how lady beer makers looked in the medieval ages? For a significant period, women were the only people who made ales, but then men realized that since women were making money, it was no longer seen as women's work, so women got progressively shunted out of it, mainly through getting stereotyped as being undesirable, sinful, and, worst of all, watering down the booze. Anyway, later at the actual village, Shaggy comes across what the mayor claims to be an old shoe buckle. Though this is a Puritan village, it could also be a hat buckle. Later, whilst Shaggy and Scooby deplete the town's food supply, Ben has invited the rest of the gang to his family's ancestral home. After Fred notices a painting of Sarah, Ben starts detailing the true story of Sarah Ravencroft, and how instead of being some kind of malicious witch, Sarah was actually a Wiccan.
Wiccans were people who were in tune with the forces of nature.
She believed in using herbs and other natural elements.
Wiccans have been misunderstood, accused of sorcery. In fact, the word witch comes from Wicca.
Do me a favor and hold on to that description of Wicca for me. It'll be important later. More to the point, Ben explains that Sarah used to treat people under a large oak tree and wrote all of her recipes in her journal. Ben has spent years looking for that book, believing that finding it would exonerate his ancestor, having already checked around the most prominent oak tree in town, assuming that it was buried somewhere around there. Later, Fred, Daphne, and Velma, along with Ben, are at the village joining some of the tourists and trying to spot the ghost of Sarah. Having no luck seeing her, many of them leave. At the same time, Shaggy and Scooby, having finished their meal, are now walking the streets, noticing how empty the town is looking, crossing paths with a trio you probably recognize. Having no experience with goths, Shaggy and Scooby flee in mortal terror right past the trajectory of the fireball-slinging ghost of a witch, colliding with Velma.
Roast?
A roast?
Witch's roast?
You saw the witch's ghost?
Springing into action, the gang investigates the witch's path of terror, noticing how all the tops of the trees have been symmetrically cut. The gang also spots in the distance a bunch of strange, colorful lights going off. Investigating them, it's revealed that those lights are in reality the Hex Girls practicing their show.
I'm gonna cast a spell on you.
Okay, now it's time to get into the main reason why people remember this movie. So much so that this performance is pretty much its signature scene. The Hex Girls, Thorn, played by prominent voice actor Jennifer Hale, Luna, as played by also very storied voice actor Kimberly Brooks, and Dusk, voiced by the Go-Go's bassist Jane Weedland. The Hex Girls are by far the most popular recurring side characters ever introduced into Scooby Doo. And let's be honest, the Scooby Doo franchise doesn't always have a good track record with new characters.
Look away, Daphne. We all promised each other that we would never speak of him. Not ever.
The Hex Girls have become so enmeshed with the Scooby Doo brand that they've appeared in some capacity in pretty much every subsequent incarnation of the show, showing up in What's New Scooby Doo, the movie Legend of the Vampire, appearing on Mystery Incorporated twice, not only helping to solve 2 different monsters of the week, but also playing a small part in solving the show's overarching mystery. Their last appearance as a group so far was in Scooby Doo and Guess Who, a show which was supposed to be about the gang solving a mystery with real-life celebrities, like Jim Gaffigan or Urkel, with them being the special guest stars for their episode. Even the on-fire garbage can that called itself Velma put in Thorn. This is actually astounding when you consider the fact that in the context of the movie's plot, until near the end, they were only supposed to be a red herring culprit for the mystery of the Ghost Witch. Furthermore, and I'm concerned this is going to come across as ruder than I mean to, we don't know that much about them. The most we know about the Hex Girls is that Thorn's real name is Sally McKnight, and she, like Dusk and Luna, are from Oakhaven, with her dad being the Mr. McKnight who you met earlier. And to a lesser extent, the Hex Girls' fangs are actually fake teeth made by Luna's dentist father. And those things may not even be true for all versions of them that have ever been shown. And as far as I can tell, the internet isn't even sure if Luna is black or some kind of Latina. There was even that weird period where she was white, but they kiboshed that real quick. To be clear, I'm not trying to say it's dumb to like them. I also think they're great. Especially because as it's considered common knowledge that a lot of girls, now women, who grew up in the 90s claim the Hex Girls as being their lesbian or bi-awakening characters. And I mean, every time they show up, it's established the gang are also fans. So even in universe, they're loved.
I love you, Hex Girl!
Getting back to the story, after finishing up their show, the gang casually interrogates the girls and concludes that while Fred and Daphne monitor the Hex Girl to see what they do next, Velma wants to keep looking over the area where Shaggy and Scooby saw the ghost. Investigating the area further, Velma finds tire tracks, leading to what should be an abandoned barn, only to spy the mayor walking out. So, while Shaggy and Scooby trail the mayor while he walks around town, Velma and Ben will investigate the barn closer, discovering a recently used cherry picker.
But who would be driving it this late at night?
That's the mystery.
Meanwhile, after the Hex Girls part ways for the night,
Bad dreams, sisters.
Bad dreams, Sister Thorn.
Fred and Daphne follow Thorn to her house and see her walk into a shed and begin mixing some kind of concoction. During this, returning back to Shaggy and Scooby, they discover the mayor walking into a large warehouse, going inside and finding the witch. Resuming fleeing, they somehow manage to bump into Velma again, with Daphne and Fred not being too far behind. Compiling everything they've learned so far, Velma suspects she needs one more clue to finish this case.
Here's what we're going to do.
A short while later, at the Hex Girls stage, Velma has actually invited the Hex Girls back to the stage to put an end to this case, and, just as she suspected, the witch shows up once again. While running, Velma fakes a fall to trick the witch into getting close enough to get thwacked with a tree branch onto their trap, revealing the witch to be Mr. McKnight.
Daddy?
Hello, Sally.
Velma explained that along with some repurposed pyrotechnics from his own daughter's show, Mr. McKnight, dressing as the witch being suspended in the air by a cherry picker driven by the diner owner, is just one part of a town-wide plan to bring tourists to Oakhaven. For obvious reasons, trying to make money off the back of what he believes to be an untrue account of his ancestor infuriates Ben to no end. Now, allegedly, the town doing this was supposed to be the only mystery, but the writers felt that it was an unsatisfactory ending, so what happens next was deemed to be a superior conclusion. So, later at the Ravencroft estate, Ben is discussing Sarah's Wiccan legacy, and while Fred apologizes for misinterpreting Thorne's peppermint-enclosed throat care routine, Luna brings up Thorne's Wiccan heritage.
Yeah, right. Sally McKnight, 1/16th blood on my mother's side.
So, you remember what Velma said about Wicca earlier in the movie? Well, here's the fun thing. Most of, if not all of what Velma said is patently false. I think the writers got Wicca, which was invented in the 20th century, making it a modern religion, confused with its inspirations of paganism and druidry. The most accurate thing Velma said is that the Old English word version of the word Wicca is the root of the word witch. It just happens that the Wiccan religion just went a little more literal with the translation. So I guess what I'm really trying to communicate to you is that Wicca isn't an ethnic identity like some other religions are. So Thorne's 1/16th Wiccan comment doesn't actually make any sense. I should probably be clear that I don't want this to ruin the movie for you. I just wanted to make it clear that that's what Wiccans actually are. Anyway, the mayor and Mr. McKnight swing by to apologize to Ben and reveal that something they were ashamed to admit up until now is that by accident during the creation of the Puritan village, they found Sarah's grave marker.
We found it in a bulldozed pile of dirt and rocks. We didn't want to upset you.
And that's all they found. No body, no book. This gets Velma's brain going, and she realizes that the buckle Shaggy found wasn't from a shoe. It's the clasp of Sarah's journal, putting together that Sarah actually did hide her book underneath an old oak tree. It was just under a tree that had been turned into a stump hundreds of years ago, so Ben never thought to check. Getting Scooby to dig deeper, they uncover an old chest where Ben finds Sarah's book. That's an awfully ominous-looking cover for a journal. And that's because it's not a journal, it's actually a spell book.
You see, Sarah wasn't a Wiccan. She was indeed a witch.
And by this movie's logic, since Sarah was a witch, that makes Ben a warlock. And with this betrayal, I guess he is a deceiver, yes. Turns out there's also a very good reason why, even after doing so much construction around Oakhaven, they never uncovered her body. The actual Wiccans of Oakhaven trapped her in her book. In reality, Ben had been searching all this time for the book so he could use the spells inside and free her. Also revealing that ever since Ben learned about the gang, he knew they would be the perfect people to find Sarah's spellbook. So he manufactured the museum situation from the beginning of the movie to lead them right to him.
I tricked you into helping me, and it worked.
As for the townsfolk's ghost witch plan, Ben actually had no idea about any of that, but it did sure serve as a great distraction.
Together, we shall reign supreme!
After Ben binds the Hex Girls and puts the mayor and Mr. McKnight in the pillory, the gang tries to keep the book away from him, while he flings real magic at them. And despite their best efforts, the gang can't quite stop him from freeing Sarah. There is a little wrinkle in this plan, though. Ben was so focused on freeing Sarah that he never considered that she might not be all that interested in taking orders from her descendant, nor ruling over what she wants to destroy.
I serve no one, leastwise a worm like thee.
And Ben can't actually reseal her. Apparently only a pure of heart Wiccan can do that. This does give Velma an idea, though. So while Shaggy and Scooby get chased by a giant turkey, then try the old Wicked Witch of the West maneuver.
What was that? Like it worked in The Wizard of Oz.
Velma frees Thorne and convinces her that she is the only one who can seal Sarah away properly.
Are you crazy? I told you! I'm not really a witch. You still have Wiccan blood, which means only you can read the spell that will send Sarah Ravencroft back to where she came from.
Getting the book away from her, Thorne reads the incantation, sucking Sarah back into her spell book. Unfortunately for Ben, though, Sarah isn't leaving alone. The book also catching fire, destroying it. Anyway, now that the town's Puritan village is a smoldering heap, they have to make do with the giant turkey and the Hex Girls to put on their autumn fest. And yeah, the Hex Girls songs are a little hokey, but let's be honest, that's kind of how we like them.